The automaton paradox. A stuffed polecat, a natural enemy, drawn by a string towards a mother turkey. Instead of the expected fury, the turkey embraces it, nestling the predator beneath her. Why? Because from within the polecat, a small recorder plays a cheep sound. Turn the recorder off and the turkey attacks. This isn't a glitch. It's a profound revelation about the biological vulnerability of intelligence. By the end of this segment, you will possess a potent mental model, the automaton paradox. This seemingly absurd experiment, as described by Robert Cialdini in the opening section of his book, reveals something chilling. Even complex organisms operate on fixed action patterns, pre-programmed behavioral sequences triggered by a single, often superficial cue. As Cialdini puts it, we too have our pre-programmed tapes, and although they usually work to our advantage, the trigger features that activate them can be used to dupe us into playing them at the wrong times. We might instinctively recoil, asserting our human intelligence separates us from such primitive programming. Surely, we think, we are not so easily manipulated by a mere cheep or a single word. And yet, in the accelerating pace and informational overload of 2024, our reliance on these cognitive shortcuts, these click-word responses, is not merely convenient, it's becoming necessary. This is the automaton paradox. The more sophisticated our world becomes, the more primitive our decision-making often reverts. Consider your own click-word triggers. Do you accept the symbol of price as an automatic indicator of quality, as with the jewelry store customers who bought turquoise at twice the price when they perceived it as scarce? Do you defer to a title, doctor, professor, CEO, without questioning the relevance of that authority to the immediate situation? Does a well-tailored suit, or even a luxury car, command a subconscious respect, an automatic trust that might be entirely unwarranted? These are all manifestations of deeply ingrained psychological gravity. The Profiteer's Edge protocol demands that we recognize this. Compliance professionals don't create these forces. They align with them. As Cialdini wisely notes, all that is required is to trigger the great stores of influence that already exist in the situation and direct them toward the intended target. They act like jujitsu masters, using our own mental weight and momentum against us. In the attention economy, AI models are now mastering this protocol, learning precisely which cheeps, whether a viral trend or a perceived scarcity in crypto, will trigger our automatic participation, often without conscious deliberation. The danger isn't the technology itself, but our unexamined susceptibility to its exploitation of these fundamental psychological levers. We think we are smarter than the turkey, but as we are about to see, a simple photocopy machine proves we are just as programmable. Because heuristic, we exist in a paradox. We pride ourselves on reason, on the deliberate processing of information, yet our daily lives are often dictated by deeply ingrained, almost mechanical responses. Nowhere is this more evident than in the subtle art of persuasion, where the illusion of reason can be conjured with a single word. Consider Ellen Langer's groundbreaking Harvard Library study. On its face, the results are baffling. When people were waiting to use a Xerox machine, a simple request like, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine?" yielded a 60% compliance rate. But when the request was slightly altered to include a reason, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush?" compliance shot up to an astounding 94%. This seems perfectly logical. People want a reason. Here's where the paradox deepens, and where we must steelman the intuitive belief that we are always rational actors. One might argue, of course, a good reason persuades people. That's just common sense. And that's precisely the point Cialdini masterfully illuminates. In a third variation, Langer tested this fundamental assumption. The request became, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I have to make some copies? This reason, upon any logical inspection, is utterly devoid of new information. It's a redundant statement. Yet, compliance remained almost as high at 93%. The critical insight here is that the human brain, especially under conditions of informational overload, a phenomenon vastly amplified in our current attention economy, where every app, every headline, every AI-generated feed vies for our processing power, defaults to a mental macro. It's less about the quality of the reason and more about the structure of the request. As Robert Cialdini starkly observes, it seems that it was not the whole series of words, but the first one, because that made the difference. He further notes, just as the cheep sound of turkey chicks triggered an automatic mothering response, so, too, did the word because trigger an automatic compliance response from Langer's subjects, even when they were given no subsequent reason to comply. This isn't rational evaluation. It's a deeply ingrained shortcut, a verbal trigger that signals reason incoming, prepare for compliance. In an age dominated by remote work and digital communication, where context is often stripped bare, these linguistic shortcuts become even more potent, bypassing critical thought. To audit your own compliance, ask yourself, am I saying yes to the true merit of this request, or simply to the comforting sound of a because? Are the digital prompts, emails, or even AI interactions leveraging this very heuristic against my better judgment? Our defense algorithm against this semantic jujitsu is straightforward. When confronted with a because statement, particularly in a high-pressure or rapid-fire information environment, deploy the conjunction strip-down protocol. Strip the sentence of its conjunctions. If the core request still makes logical sense and aligns with your interests without the appended reason, then proceed deliberately. If, however, the reason dissolves into redundancy or irrelevance, recognize that your mental autopilot has been triggered. You're responding to a signal, not a substance. But semantic tricks are just the surface. What happens when our biological hardwiring forces us to accept a debt we never asked for? The debt of the uninvited. The year is 1985. A nation, Ethiopia, ravaged by famine and civil war. A people enduring unimaginable privation. Yet, despite its crippling needs, Ethiopia sends $5,000 in relief aid to Mexico City, struck by a devastating earthquake. A bewildering act, certainly, until you uncover the historical ledger. Mexico had sent aid to Ethiopia in 1935. This isn't charity. It's a deep-seated, uninvited obligation. The debt transcended generations, transcended immediate survival needs. This paradox unveils the subtle, yet terrifyingly potent, reciprocity rule, a fundamental psychological principle. As humans, we are wired to return favors in kind, even when that favor was never requested. It's not merely a social nicety. It's an ancient, deeply ingrained behavioral script. This social operating system, normally adaptive, becomes a vulnerability when exploited, especially in today's attention economy. Consider the uninvited gift audit. In traditional direct mail campaigns, like those of the disabled American veterans, a simple request for donations yields an 18% response rate. But when they include an unsolicited gift, say, gummed address labels, that rate nearly doubles to 35%. Why? Because the recipient now feels a psychological burden, an uninvited debt. It's a brilliant, if ethically gray, maneuver. In the modern landscape of AI and digital services, this manifests as the freemium model or free trials that require your data. You didn't ask for the AI tool that can draft your emails or summarize your meetings, but you accept it. The service feels like a gift, yet the price, often hidden, is your data, your attention, your behavioral patterns. The moment you accept this gift, a psychological ledger is opened, and you become obliged, in ways you might not consciously register. It's the digital equivalent of a psychological Trojan horse, delivered with a smile. Now let's turn to the Amway bug analysis. Decades ago, the Amway Corporation revolutionized door-to-door sales with a device they called the bug, a collection of free product samples, polishes, detergents, sprays. Salespeople left these bugs for days, at no cost or obligation. But the outcome was staggering. As Robert Cialdini notes in his foundational work, the distributors were bewildered, happily so, but nonetheless bewildered, by the startling power of the BUG. He quotes one distributor exclaiming, "The most fantastic retail idea we've ever had." On the average, customers purchased about half the total amount of the bug when it is picked up. This wasn't about product quality. It was about the profound discomfort of accepting an uninvited gift and then offering nothing in return. It's a silent, psychological transaction, creating a burden of purchase. This bug acts as a powerful psychological anchor, dragging individuals towards a decision they might otherwise avoid. So, how do we navigate this terrain? This brings us to the refusal then retreat defense. The key is what I call the redefinition protocol. When an uninvited gift or seemingly generous offer appears, especially from a vendor or a new digital service, pause. Acknowledge the offer, but mentally reframe it as a sales tactic, not a genuine favor. As Cialdini wisely states, the rule says that favors are to be met with favors. It does not require that tricks be met with favors. This protocol requires a conscious act of mental self-governance. If a free sample arrives, accept it, sure. But internally, label it a marketing expenditure, not a personal gift. When a free AI service offers to streamline your workflow in exchange for data, define that data collection as the cost of the service, not a secondary generosity. This mental recategorization disarms the reciprocity rule. It allows you to evaluate the subsequent request on its intrinsic merits, rather than on the manufactured feeling of obligation. This is not about being cynical. It's about being strategically discerning in a world where generosity is often weaponized. This obligation is so strong it can force a president to break the law. The next case study explains the stupidest political break-in in history. Reciprocal jujitsu, rejection then retreat. The Boy Scout came at me with an offer of $5 circus tickets. I declined. He retreated, offering $1 chocolate bars instead. I bought 2, instantly regretting it. I didn't like chocolate bars. I like dollars. Yet, he walked away with my money, and I stood there with unwanted candy. What just happened? This seemingly innocuous encounter reveals a profound mechanism of influence. Reciprocal jujitsu, specifically the rejection then retreat technique. It's a potent algorithm woven into the fabric of human social interaction, capable of weaponizing a concession to force compliance. The core principle is an extreme anchor. To understand this, imagine a psychological tripwire. A skilled practitioner starts with a demand so large, so audacious, you're almost guaranteed to reject it. This initial, inflated request isn't meant to be accepted. It's the anchor that establishes a high bar for perceived value. Then, the practitioner executes a strategic withdrawal, presenting a much smaller, more palatable request, the one they desired all along. Your brain, already anchored by the initial extreme, perceives this retreat as a genuine concession, a favor. And because the rule of reciprocity is deeply ingrained in our species, we feel a powerful, often unconscious, drive to return that favor. The Watergate break-in provides a chilling, real-world case study of this mechanism. Gordon Liddy, a figure known for questionable judgment, initially proposed a $1 million scheme to the committee to re-elect the president. This plan was absurd. Chase planes, kidnapping, mugging squads, even high-class call girls to blackmail Democratic politicians. It was predictably rejected. A week later, he presented a second plan, still ambitious, for $500,000. Again, rejection. Finally, Liddy submitted his bare-bones $250,000 plan, the one involving the Watergate break-in itself. This plan, still foolish and incredibly risky, was approved. Why? As Jeb Magruder, a participant in that decision, testified, "After starting at the grandiose sum of $1 million, we thought that probably $250,000 would be an acceptable figure. We were reluctant to send him away with nothing." Liddy didn't get a yes because his plan was brilliant. He got it because his retreat from an extreme demand triggered a profound concession trap. The committee members felt an obligation to reciprocate his compromise with one of their own, leading to approval of a plan they might otherwise have dismissed outright. As Robert Cialdini puts it, "It was our suspicion that the critical thing about a requester's retreat from a larger to a smaller favor was its appearance as a concession." And indeed, it appeared as such. In the attention economy of 2024 to 2025, this psychological jujitsu is deployed relentlessly. Consider the free services offered by many AI platforms. The initial grand promise of limitless capability is often an extreme anchor. We, the users, reject the full commitment of time or data, and then we're offered a basic or freemium version. This feels like a concession from the provider, triggering our reciprocal urge to engage more deeply, to commit our time, our data, our attention, even when the underlying value might not warrant it. We are pulled into the concession trap, believing we've secured a better deal, when in reality we've merely complied with a strategically reduced demand. The defense protocol against such manipulation is not always easy, but it is vital. Separate the dealer from the deal. When faced with a concession, ask yourself if the reduced offer genuinely serves your interest, or if it simply feels like a favor you're compelled to return. Did you want the chocolate bars? Or did you just feel obligated to take them because the ticket seller had come down from his original price? Analyze the actual merit of the request, stripped of the perceived concession. Don't fall prey to the automatic click of reciprocity when a tactical retreat is played. Liddy used reciprocity to get a yes. But the Chinese communists used a different tool to get American POWs to betray their own country without any physical torture. The consistency trap. Consider a gambler at the racetrack. Moments before placing a bet, uncertainty reigns. But the instant the ticket is bought, a curious shift occurs. A surge of confidence, a newfound certainty in their horse's victory, even though nothing about the horse has changed. This isn't irrational optimism. It's the raw power of the consistency trap, a fundamental mechanism of influence that, once engaged, compels us to align our inner world with our outer actions. This wisdom is not for those who would cynically exploit the deepest psychological blueprints of human nature for profit. Rather, it is a strategic guide for those of us who aim to fortify our own agency and navigate the treacherous currents of persuasion with integrity, understanding how our own minds can be turned against us by masters of this art. At the core of this principle is what we call the start small and build strategy. It's a psychological jujitsu move, leveraging our innate drive for coherence. One of the most chilling real-world case studies comes from the Korean War, where Chinese communists faced the daunting task of extracting collaboration from American prisoners of war. These soldiers were trained to give nothing but name, rank, and serial number. Physical brutality yielded little. So the Chinese deployed a subtle, insidious campaign. They began with trivial requests, asking prisoners to make mildly anti-American statements like, "The United States is not perfect," or pro-communist observations, such as, "In a communist country, unemployment is not a problem." As the author, Robert Cialdini, details, once these minor requests were complied with, the men found themselves pushed to submit to related yet more substantive requests. These small, seemingly inconsequential statements, especially when made public, began to subtly shift the soldier's self-identity. A man who publicly agreed the U.S. wasn't perfect found it harder to resist listing its flaws, then signing his name to it, then reading it to fellow prisoners, then writing essays, and so on. They became collaborators not through force, but through self-persuasion, trapped by their own incremental commitments. The psychological mechanism here is amplified by a crucial protocol: the magic act. A verbal agreement is fleeting, easily rationalized away, but a written one, it hardens the commitment, serving as undeniable proof of one's stance. As Cialdini observes, there is something magical about writing things down. This isn't literal magic, but a profound psychological anchor. Once you put something on paper, it becomes an external artifact of your internal state, pushing you to maintain consistency with that declared identity. Think of the Chinese POWs copying pro-communist statements. The act of writing, even under duress, created an internal shift. In our 2024 to 2025 landscape, this magic act protocol takes on new digital forms. Every click, every like, every short message posted on a social platform, every small investment in a nascent crypto project. These are digital signatures of micro-commitments. They become tiny anchors, each pulling at our self-identity. The attention economy thrives on this. A small, early engagement amplified by algorithms can morph into a deeply entrenched belief system. It's like planting a tiny digital seed in the fertile ground of your online persona. Left unchecked, it can blossom into an entire identity garden, cultivated by 1,000 subtle acts of consistency. Even if the initial seed was planted almost unknowingly. Consider the early adopters of certain cryptocurrency projects. A small initial investment, a few posts in a Telegram group, expressing belief in the project's vision, these are small commitments. But as the external narrative shifts, or the project faces challenges, the drive for consistency can compel individuals to hold onto their diamond hands, not necessarily because of objective analysis, but because their self-identity has become intertwined with being a believer or an early supporter. The initial small commitment becomes a gravitational well, drawing in further rationalizations and resistance to contradictory evidence. So, how do we navigate this? How do we prevent these small commitments from silently rewriting our self-identity in ways we might later regret? The defense algorithm begins here. Listen to your stomach. Cialdini himself advocates for this visceral signal. If you feel a tightening, a sense of being cornered or coerced, it's a warning. This isn't about rejecting consistency outright. A steelman of consistency would argue it's vital for a stable self and predictable social interactions. Indeed, as Cialdini notes in his analysis, good personal consistency is highly valued in our culture. But we are speaking of foolish consistency, a mindless, automatic adherence to a past statement or action when new information, or even an internal unease, suggests a different path. The algorithm is this: when you feel that gut-level discomfort, that internal red flag telling you your compliance is driven by a need to be consistent with a choice you were tricked into, call it out. Verbalize the absurdity of foolish consistency to the requester. As Cialdini recounts in his own experiences with manipulative sales tactics, simply stating, "I refuse to allow myself to be locked into a mechanical sequence of commitment and consistency when I know it's wrong-headed," can be disarming. It forces the manipulator to drop their jujitsu and engage with reason, or, more often, to retreat in bewilderment. This isn't just about avoiding a bad deal. It's about reclaiming cognitive autonomy in an age saturated with subtle attempts to steer our choices. By recognizing the click-whir of commitment and consistency, we can choose to engage our higher faculties rather than operating on autopilot. They rewrote the soldier's past. But the next principle is used to rewrite the value of a car, a house, or a contract after you've already agreed to buy it. The lowball. Today, we're dissecting a psychological mechanism so cunning, it turns your very decisions against you. It's the silent architect behind countless choices we believe are rational, yet often leave us feeling profoundly bamboozled. This is the lowball tactic. Imagine the high-pressure environment of a car showroom. A salesman offers a price so compelling, say for $100 below market value, that you jump at it. You commit. You fill out the paperwork. Visualize yourself behind the wheel. Perhaps even take it for a joyous spin around the block. You've psychologically owned that car. Then, an error is discovered. That initial, irresistible advantage? It vanishes. The air conditioning was somehow omitted from the calculation, or the manager simply can't approve such a loss. Yet you still buy the car. Why? This is the self-sustaining nature of commitment, a phenomenon Robert Cialdini decodes in his seminal work. Once we commit to a choice, our internal world shifts to justify it. Our brains, masterful storytellers, begin to invent new reasons, building what Cialdini calls strong legs to support the decision, even when the original foundation crumbles. As Cialdini observes, automobile dealers have come to understand the ability of a personal commitment to build its own support system, a support system of new justifications for the commitment. Often these justifications provide so many strong legs for the decision to stand on that when the dealer pulls away only one leg, the original one, there is no collapse. You've invested time, emotion, and cognitive energy. To back out now would be to admit a mistake, to confront inconsistency within your own narrative. The slight increase in price seems negligible against the weight of your newly formed conviction. This isn't just about car sales. In the age of remote work and the gig economy, how many freelancers commit to a project at a certain rate, only for the scope to expand, demanding more effort than initially priced? The initial lowball, perhaps an attractive project description or a flexible deadline, secures the commitment. Once engaged, the freelancer finds themselves inventing new justifications. It's good for my portfolio. I'll learn a new skill. It might lead to bigger things, even as the original, favorable terms dissolve. Similarly, in the volatile world of crypto, investors often commit to a token based on an initial, appealing promise or a brief surge. When market realities shift, and the initial advantage evaporates, the cognitive dissonance kicks in. They don't pull out. Instead, they double down, finding new fundamentals or community support to justify their original, now less rational, commitment. So, how do we defend against this psychological jujitsu, especially when our fast-paced, information-saturated lives demand quick decisions? The defense protocol is not about avoiding commitment, but about rigorous self-interrogation. Cialdini offers a profound heart-of-hearts check, a critical point of reflection. When you feel that internal shift, that subtle pressure to continue with a deal despite a disadvantage being revealed, pause. Ask yourself, knowing what I know about the real price, the real effort, the real value, would I make this exact same choice again? This isn't a superficial mental exercise. It requires a deep dive into your genuine feelings, a quiet moment before your cognitive apparatus has a chance to fabricate justifications. Cialdini describes his own experience at a gas station, caught by a price discrepancy. After the heart-of-hearts check, he realized, I knew then that without the price advantage, those other reasons would not have brought me there. They hadn't created the decision had created them. The lowball isn't just a trick played by others. It's a vulnerability within our own need for internal consistency. Recognizing when our brains are generating post hoc rationalizations for a pre-existing commitment is the first step to reclaiming agency. We fool ourselves to stay consistent, but when we are uncertain, we stop looking inside and start looking at everyone else, often with fatal results. Pluralistic ignorance. The story of Catherine Genovese is etched into the annals of social psychology, a chilling paradox that laid bare a fundamental flaw in human group behavior. 38 neighbors in Queens, New York, watched as a killer stalked and stabbed a woman for 35 agonizing minutes. Not one of them called the police, not because they were cold or uncaring, but because they were uncertain and, crucially, looked to the inaction of others as proof that it wasn't a true emergency. This horrifying event, explored extensively in Cialdini's work, reveals the treacherous illusion of safety in numbers, the pluralistic ignorance effect. Our primal instinct to assess danger by observing the crowd can, ironically, paralyze us. Each individual, striving to appear composed, glances at others, sees their apparent calm, and interprets it as evidence that nothing is truly wrong. It's a collective, silent agreement born of uncertainty, a feedback loop where inaction validates inaction, even as the danger escalates. One might argue that people aren't truly apathetic. They simply lack clarity or believe others have already intervened. And there's truth to that. But as Cialdini explains, the core problem is precisely this diffusion of responsibility combined with the uncertainty of the situation. In the chapter on social proof, he states that very often an emergency is not obviously an emergency. Is the man clutching his chest a heart attack victim or just drunk? Are those shouts a cry for help or just a domestic dispute? In our increasingly noisy and information-saturated world, the modern attention economy, for instance, we are constantly bombarded with signals, many of which are ambiguous. We scroll past countless pleas or disturbing news items, a sea of digital bystanders. Each click or swipe passed by others can subtly reinforce the notion that it's not my problem or someone else will handle it. It's the digital equivalent of seeing everyone else looking calm and doing nothing. So, what is the protocol when you are the one in distress, when time is of the essence and physical abilities might be failing? How do you pierce through this psychological fog? Cialdini provides a precise, powerful algorithm to devictimize yourself. Do not scream a general help into the digital void or the literal crowd. Instead, isolate one individual. Look them directly in the eye, point, and assign direct responsibility. Say, "You, sir, in the blue jacket, I need help. Call 911. This single, focused command cuts through all three layers of pluralistic ignorance. 1. It removes uncertainty *, you explicitly define the situation as an emergency. 2. It assigns responsibility *, the designated person knows they are the one to act, eliminating the diffusion of responsibility. 3. It provides direction *, they know what action to take. This isn't just advice. It's a survival protocol. It transforms passive observers into active responders. As Cialdini vividly recounts from his own experience after a car accident, where drivers were gawking but not stopping, pulling myself up so I could be seen clearly, I pointed at the driver of one car, "Call the police," to a second and a third driver, pointing directly each time, "Pull over, we need help." The response was instantaneous and infectious. Social proof can kill you on a city street, but it can also compel you to kill yourself, as discovered in the chilling Werther effect. The Werther effect. After a suicide makes front-page news, the number of people who die in commercial airline crashes can spike by a staggering 1,000%. Automobile fatalities shoot up. This is not some macabre coincidence, nor is it merely a ripple effect of widespread grief. This is a chilling, pathological form of social proof. One might initially argue, and quite reasonably, that these tragic spikes are simply a byproduct of broader societal stress. Perhaps the same conditions that drive some to suicide also make others more reckless or distract them at critical moments. Compelling argument, to be sure. Yet, the data tells a far more nuanced and disturbing story. As Professor David Phillips' research reveals, these increases in fatal accidents are not general but eerily specific. Single victim suicides generate single fatality wrecks. Suicide plus murder incidents lead to multiple fatality wrecks. This isn't random distraction. It's a grim, imitative act. Phillips refers to this phenomenon as the Werther effect, named after Goethe's novel which, centuries ago, triggered a wave of copycat suicides across Europe. He demonstrates that troubled individuals, upon reading about another's self-inflicted death, decide that suicide is an appropriate action for themselves. Crucially, the power of this social proof is amplified by what we call the similarity multiplier. The book emphasizes, the principle of social proof operates most powerfully when we are observing the behavior of people just like us. Phillips' data confirms this. When news reports detailed the suicide of a young person, it was young drivers who then died in single-car crashes. When an older person's suicide was publicized, older drivers were the ones who perished. This isn't just imitation. It's identity-aligned imitation. In our current attention economy, this social feedback loop is turbocharged. The instant algorithmic amplification of trends, even tragic ones, means that a solution embraced by a similar peer can echo globally within minutes, not days. We see this not only in grim statistics but in organizational behaviors. The copycat audit becomes essential. How often do companies, in their quest for growth or relevance, irrationally mimic competitor strategies? Not because they are inherently good, but because everyone else is doing it? This herd mentality, devoid of critical analysis, can lead entire industries off a cliff, like buffalo blindly following the lead, as described in the book. So what is our defense algorithm? We must disengage the autopilot when the data is falsified, or when the evidence is clearly a social feedback loop. When an action gains traction not from intrinsic merit but from the sheer number of visible participants, a red flag should deploy. As Robert Cialdini states, the principle of social proof states that we use information about how others have behaved to help us determine proper conduct for ourselves. The critical distinction today is between genuine, organic social proof and its manipulated, amplified, or identity-targeted forms. We must cultivate a deep skepticism towards trends, particularly in an environment where information is increasingly curated to trigger unconscious compliance. We follow those who are similar, but we also follow those we simply like. And that liking can be manufactured in a lab. The friendly thief, the Tupperware party. On the surface, a social gathering, casual conversation, perhaps a prize won, a laugh shared. Yet, beneath this veneer of community, a potent psychological weapon is deployed. One so subtle it transforms casual acquaintances into unwitting sales agents. The genius of the model, as Robert Cialdini decodes, isn't just about the product. It's about the deep-seated human preference to say yes to someone we know, someone we like. He notes, the strength of that social bond is twice as likely to determine product purchase as is preference for the product itself. Consider the implications in our hyperconnected 2024. This isn't just about plastic containers. It's about the commercialization of friendship itself. Every like, every share, every referral link online is a digital Tupperware party, leveraging our social graph for profit. Algorithms, designed to maximize engagement, constantly feed us content from friends, often paid influencers, blurring the lines between genuine recommendation and monetized endorsement. The endless chain method, notoriously perfected by the Shackley Corporation, extends this manipulation. A salesperson arrives, armed with the name of a mutual friend, implying a pre-vetted trust. As Cialdini quotes from their manual, phoning or calling on a prospect and being able to say that Mr. So-and-so, a friend of his, felt he would benefit by giving you a few moments of his time is virtually as good as a sale 50% made before you enter. This isn't selling. It's social jujitsu, using your existing bonds against you. But the weaponization of liking extends beyond direct social ties to a phenomenon Cialdini calls the halo effect. Imagine a spotlight that, when shown on one positive attribute, like physical attractiveness, illuminates and exaggerates all others. We automatically assign qualities like talent, kindness, and intelligence to good-looking people. This click where response is unconscious. Think of the Canadian federal elections where attractive candidates received significantly more votes, or hiring studies where good grooming outweighed qualifications. In the age of AI, this effect is amplified through perfectly sculpted virtual influencers and deepfake personas, designed to be universally likable, bypassing critical thought. We are often persuaded not by logical merit, but by the shimmering halo of an agreeable face. The tendency to like what is familiar also plays a role. We prefer what we've been exposed to, even unconsciously. This can be exploited, as seen in the Ohio election where a candidate changed his name to a politically traditional one, or how advertising repeats jingles until familiarity breeds affection. Similarly, simple compliments, even when transparently manipulative, work. Joe Girard, the legendary car salesman, sent 13,000 customers monthly cards with just 2 words, "I like you." He understood, we are phenomenal suckers for flattery. We tend, as a rule, to believe praise and to like those who provide it, oftentimes when it is clearly false. This insight is now baked into the conversational AI of customer service, where programmed empathy and flattery build rapport designed to influence our choices. So, how do we defend against this pervasive, friendly thief? The defense protocol is not about universal distrust, nor is it about rejecting genuine connections. It's about building a cognitive firewall. When you feel yourself liking a compliance practitioner more quickly or deeply than warranted by the actual interaction, recognize that sensation as a tripwire. This heightened emotional arousal is your signal. Cialdini advises us to ask, is it the merits of the offer itself, or is it the artificial sheen of association and engineered likability that is swaying me? His core advice: mentally separate Dan from that Chevy or Toyota he's trying to sell. It is vital to remember at this point that, should we decide for Dan's car, we will be driving it, not him, off the dealership lot. Focus on the intrinsic value of the request, not the appeal of the requester. It's a powerful distinction for navigating our complex world. We buy from friends, but what happens when the person asking isn't a friend, but a figure in a white lab coat? The rule of the few. The city of Mesa, Arizona, home to a sizable Mormon population and a magnificent temple. Had I any inherent interest in its architecture or the nuances of the faith? None. Yet, upon reading a newspaper article, I found myself drawn, almost irresistibly, to tour its inner sanctum. The reason? That article announced that for a few days, and a few days only, non-members could visit a section traditionally banned forever. A fleeting window. Suddenly, something I had no prior desire for became supremely attractive. This, in essence, is the rule of the few. Robert Cialdini, in his profound work, unveils the formidable power of scarcity, rooted in our deep aversion to loss and a primal human drive for freedom. It's a mechanism that, when engaged, can bypass our logical minds, leading to decisions we might otherwise deem irrational. First, let's dissect the core, the loss versus gain framing. Why did that temple become so alluring? It wasn't the promise of gain, no newfound interest in its design or doctrine. It was the imminent loss of an opportunity. As Cialdini so aptly states, people seem to be more motivated by the thought of losing something than by the thought of gaining something of equal value. Think of it like this: your current savings account, earning a modest interest, suddenly announces it will lose its competitive rate next month. The fear of that loss can trigger a far more urgent response to switch banks or renegotiate than the offer of a new bank gaining you a slightly better rate. In today's attention economy, this plays out relentlessly. Consider the limited-time offer for a premium subscription service. The fear of losing access to a perceived benefit, even a marginal one, is often more potent than the initial gain promised by signing up. Many platforms leverage this by offering expiring credits or last-chance discounts for digital goods, subtly activating our loss aversion. Next, the potent concept of psychological reactance, often dubbed the Romeo and Juliet effect. In the book, Cialdini describes a study involving 140 Colorado couples. When parental interference with their relationship intensified, so did their feelings of love and desire for marriage. When the interference weakened, so did the romantic feelings. This is a profound insight. Restricting a freedom, even with good intentions, often makes the forbidden object or action more desirable. In our hyperconnected 2024 landscape, this manifests powerfully in the realm of information. When certain content, be it a video, an article, or even an AI's output, is flagged, censored, or deplatformed, it doesn't always disappear. Instead, Cialdini's work predicts the very act of restriction can elevate its perceived importance and trustworthiness. The content, now scarce or forbidden, gains an almost mythic allure, sparking intense curiosity and a drive to access it, often from alternative, less regulated sources. The system, in attempting to control, inadvertently amplifies. Finally, the notorious boiler room tactic, a manipulation that exploits scarcity through artificial deadlines and limited numbers. My brother, Richard, a canny used car salesman in the book, mastered this. He would advertise a single car and schedule multiple potential buyers to arrive at the same exact time. The first buyer, leisurely inspecting the car, would suddenly face competition. This wasn't genuine market reality. It was a psychological trap. The car, now a contested resource, instantly became more desirable. Cialdini notes that for the victim, the increased desire that spurred them to buy had little to do with the merits of the car. That failure of recognition occurred for two reasons. First, the situation Richard arranged for them produced an emotional reaction that made it difficult for them to think straight. Second, as a consequence, they never stopped to think that the reason they wanted the car in the first place was to use it, not merely to have it. The protocol to counter this, as Cialdini implies, is simple yet profoundly difficult. When you feel that visceral surge of arousal, that mania of the thing, as one TV executive described being caught in a bidding war, pause. Disengage. Ask yourself, do I want this thing for its utility, its inherent value, or am I being driven by the psychological pressure of its perceived scarcity? If it's the latter, then the decision is compromised. In the digital age, think of early bird crypto offers, limited edition NFTs, or online course enrollment caps. Many are designed to induce this emotional, scarcity-driven response, not rational assessment. Scarcity makes us want things. But the most dangerous form of scarcity is when something abundant suddenly becomes taken away. The rule of the few. The city of Mesa, Arizona, home to a sizable Mormon population and a magnificent temple. Had I any inherent interest in its architecture or the nuances of the faith? None. Yet, upon reading a newspaper article, I found myself drawn, almost irresistibly, to tour its inner sanctum. The reason? That article announced that for a few days, and a few days only, non-members could visit a section traditionally banned forever. A fleeting window. Suddenly, something I had no prior desire for became supremely attractive. This, in essence, is the rule of the few. Robert Cialdini, in his profound work, unveils the formidable power of scarcity. rooted in our deep aversion to loss and a primal human drive for freedom. It's a mechanism that, when engaged, can bypass our logical minds, leading to decisions we might otherwise deem irrational. First, let's dissect the core, the loss versus gain framing. Why did that temple become so alluring? It wasn't the promise of gain, no newfound interest in its design or doctrine. It was the imminent loss of an opportunity. As Cialdini so aptly states, people seem to be more motivated by the thought of losing something than by the thought of gaining something of equal value. Think of it like this: your current savings account, earning a modest interest, suddenly announces it will lose its competitive rate next month. The fear of that loss can trigger a far more urgent response to switch banks or renegotiate than the offer of a new bank gaining you a slightly better rate. In today's attention economy, this plays out relentlessly. Consider the limited-time offer for a premium subscription service. The fear of losing access to a perceived benefit, even a marginal one, is often more potent than the initial gain promised by signing up. Many platforms leverage this by offering expiring credits or last-chance discounts for digital goods, subtly activating our loss aversion. Next, the potent concept of psychological reactance, often dubbed the Romeo and Juliet effect. In the book, Cialdini describes a study involving 140 Colorado couples. When parental interference with their relationship intensified, so did their feelings of love and desire for marriage. When the interference weakened, so did the romantic feelings. This is a profound insight. Restricting a freedom, even with good intentions, often makes the forbidden object or action more desirable. In our hyperconnected 2024 landscape, this manifests powerfully in the realm of information. When certain content, be it a video, an article, or even an AI's output, is flagged, censored, or deplatformed, it doesn't always disappear. Instead, Cialdini's work predicts the very act of restriction can elevate its perceived importance and trustworthiness. The content, now scarce or forbidden, gains an almost mythic allure, sparking intense curiosity and a drive to access it, often from alternative, less regulated sources. The system, in attempting to control, inadvertently amplifies. Finally, the notorious boiler room tactic, a manipulation that exploits scarcity through artificial deadlines and limited numbers. My brother, Richard, a canny used car salesman in the book, mastered this. He would advertise a single car and schedule multiple potential buyers to arrive at the same exact time. The first buyer, leisurely inspecting the car, would suddenly face competition. This wasn't genuine market reality. It was a psychological trap. The car, now a contested resource, instantly became more desirable. Cialdini notes that for the victim, the increased desire that spurred them to buy had little to do with the merits of the car. That failure of recognition occurred for two reasons. First, the situation Richard arranged for them produced an emotional reaction that made it difficult for them to think straight. Second, as a consequence, they never stopped to think that the reason they wanted the car in the first place was to use it, not merely to have it. The protocol to counter this, as Cialdini implies, is simple yet profoundly difficult. When you feel that visceral surge of arousal, that mania of the thing, as one TV executive described being caught in a bidding war, pause. Disengage. Ask yourself, do I want this thing for its utility, its inherent value, or am I being driven by the psychological pressure of its perceived scarcity? If it's the latter, then the decision is compromised. In the digital age, think of early bird crypto offers, limited edition NFTs, or online course enrollment caps. Many are designed to induce this emotional, scarcity-driven response, not rational assessment. Scarcity makes us want things. But the most dangerous form of scarcity is when something abundant suddenly becomes taken away. The revolution of rising expectations. Why do people revolt not when they are most oppressed, but when conditions improve and then suddenly worsen. This is the paradox of the revolution of rising expectations. A common intuition suggests that the most downtrodden, those who have known nothing but deprivation, are the ones who will rise up. Yet history and indeed psychology tells a different story. As James C. Davies's compelling theory reveals, revolutions frequently ignite when a period of improving economic and social conditions is abruptly reversed. Consider the tumultuous 1960s race riots in the United States. It was not during the centuries of abject servitude, nor the prolonged privation of Jim Crow, that mass rebellion erupted. No, it was when decades of steady, hard-won progress, legal desegregation, economic advancement, began to stall, creating a profound sense of loss for newly established freedoms. Similarly, in the twilight of the Soviet Union, when Mikhail Gorbachev introduced glasnost and perestroika, granting unprecedented liberties, many believed peace would follow. Instead, when a small group staged a coup to reinstate the old order, threatening these nascent freedoms, the populace erupted. As the book observes, the people lashed out the way a dog would if it tried taking a fresh bone from its mouth. This isn't mere discontent. It's a deep-seated human reaction known as psychological reactance. We don't simply value what is scarce. We intensely desire what was once available and is now threatened or taken away. This truth was strikingly demonstrated in Cialdini's cookie test. Participants rated cookies as more desirable when they were scarce, but here's the crucial insight. They rated them most desirable when an abundant supply was reduced to scarcity. And even then, as Cialdini highlights, the joy is not in experiencing a scarce commodity but in possessing it. It is important that we not confuse the two. The cookies didn't taste better. The desire was for the lost option, not the inherent quality. This mechanism isn't confined to historical upheavals or cookie jars. It is profoundly relevant in our current attention economy, the evolving landscape of AI, and remote work. Think of the new freedoms in remote work, flexibility, autonomy. What happens when companies, after establishing these as norms, suddenly retract them, perhaps demanding a full return to the office, citing collaboration needs, or productivity metrics? The perceived loss of this established freedom can trigger a far stronger backlash than if the freedom had never been granted. Or consider AI. As we become accustomed to powerful tools that augment our creativity and efficiency, any sudden restriction, algorithmic censorship, or data lock-in, a drop from abundance in our digital liberties, could incite powerful reactance. This is not about the inherent utility of the tool. It's about the perceived infringement on our digital prerogatives. So, how do we navigate this matrix of escalating desire and emotional response? The visceral pause protocol is your defense. When you feel that sudden flush of urgency, that panicky desire for an item or opportunity that is suddenly scarce or threatened, a drop from abundance. Stop. Recognize that emotional arousal as a signal. Your desire at that moment is likely for possession due to perceived loss, not utility. Ask yourself, do I want this for its inherent value and function, or primarily because I'm about to lose the chance to have it? This distinction is critical because the inherent value of a thing does not increase simply because its availability decreases. We are emotional animals fighting to retain control. But the modern world is overloading the very system we use to navigate it. Primitive consent. The stage is set in the wild, theatrical landscape of 1960s television. Joe Pine, known for his caustic interviews, confronts rock musician Frank Zappa. Pine, with a calculated jab, remarks about Zappa's unconventional hair. "I guess your long hair makes you a girl." Zappa's legendary retort, quick as lightning, cuts through the superficiality. "I guess your wooden leg makes you a table." This exchange, though sharp, perfectly illustrates a foundational truth of human perception. a truth that Cialdini decodes for us. The error of relying on a single, isolated cue to judge the whole. In our current information age, an era defined by the ceaseless scroll of social media, the relentless pulse of remote work, and the dizzying complexity of AI-generated content, we face an intensified version of this ancient trap. As Robert Cialdini puts it, very often in making a decision about someone or something, we don't use all the relevant available information. We use, instead, only a single, highly representative piece of the total. The brain, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data, defaults to shortcuts. We see price as an indicator of quality, titles as proof of authority, or a crowd's actions as a signal of correctness. These are our single-piece shortcuts, primitive mechanisms that, in their unthinking automaticity, leave us vulnerable. This vulnerability, however, is not always benign. It's actively exploited by what Cialdini identifies as profiteers. These individuals understand our reliance on these shortcuts and intentionally falsify, counterfeit, or misrepresent the evidence that naturally cues our responses. Consider the now ubiquitous average person on the street testimonials for products or services, often featuring actors, not genuine users. In the chapter on social proof, Cialdini vividly describes humorist Dave Barry's naming of these actors as consumers from Mars, a perfect designation for those whose social proof is manufactured, not organic. My war on profiteers protocol is simple and direct. When confronted with such blatant fakery, whether it's canned laughter on a streaming comedy, a viral crypto endorsement, or an AI-generated review meant to sway your decision, we must not just ignore it, we must actively, aggressively counterattack. Call out the manipulation, expose the artifice. Starve the exploiters of the very attention they seek. The acceleration of modern life, fueled by ever-advancing technology, demands more than just identifying the enemy. It requires a profound shift in our individual operating system. The digital hygiene algorithm is crucial. It dictates that in any high-stimulus environment, be it a crypto forum, an online market, or a social media feed, we must consciously invoke a pause and question mechanism. This isn't about distrusting all information, but about building a mental firewall against the brain-clouding arousal that accompanies scarcity or social proof. We must ask, is this emotional urgency real or engineered? Does this information serve my true interests or merely trigger an automatic response? As Robert Cialdini warns us with profound insight, with the sophisticated mental apparatus we have used to build world eminence as a species, we have created an environment so complex, fast-paced, and information-laden that we must increasingly deal with it in the fashion of the animals we long ago transcended. We are reverting to the mental capacity of the turkey. We must build defenses or be hacked. The verdict, the deepest illusion of our time, is unshakable rationality. This book, Influence, is not for the individual clinging to that illusion, the self-proclaimed rationalist, convinced their decisions are immune to persuasion. As Robert Cialdini notes, our information-laden, decision-overloaded modern life forces us to retreat to a more automatic, primitive, single-feature type of responding. We cannot consciously process everything. In 2024, from algorithmic feeds to crypto markets, our cognitive capacity is overwhelmed. The digital age weaponizes these shortcuts, turning every notification, ad, and trend into a calculated lure. This isn't a traditional battlefield. It's a digital jungle where unseen tripwires constantly trigger your click, or programs, steering you precisely where someone else desires. Therefore, our verdict, Influence, is an indispensable defensive manual for the 21st century. It equips us with essential countertactics against pervasive psychological jujitsu. Recall the jewelry store owner doubling sales by doubling prices, the expensive equals good shortcut, or Chinese POW camps, building commitment via small, written concessions, blueprints for today's gamified engagement. These patterns scale globally, not historical curiosities. The strategic protocol for navigation is the two-stage redirection. 1. Stage 1. The visceral alarm. Feel physical agitation or unwarranted liking. That gut sense of unease from the how to say no section in liking? Stop. Recognize this emotional spike as a compliance tactic indicator. 2. Stage 2. The objective filter. Calmly ask, what do I truly want from this independent of external pressures? Cialdini in Scarcity advises, the joy is not in experiencing a scarce commodity but in possessing it. It is important that we not confuse the two. Against authority, query, is this truly an expert, and are their credentials relevant? This filter separates genuine value from manufactured desire. This book fosters realism, not cynicism. It demands respect for the the automatic pathways governing our choices. To ignore them is vulnerability. To understand them is profound agency. Cialdini argues, the blitz of modern daily life demands that we have faithful shortcuts. These are not luxuries any longer. They are out-and-out necessities. Safeguard these shortcuts by challenging exploiters, not abandoning their utility. Who is this not for? This book is not for the passive participant in psychological chess, nor for the naive assuming good faith. It's not for those unwilling to confront their own built-in compliance programs. Final verdict. Influence is a critical investment, a vital toolkit for psychological self-defense in an age of pervasive persuasion. It's a compass for navigating human behavior. Discussions spark. The question now is not if these principles will be used, but how you will engage. Will you be the hacker or the hacked?